Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod with Sean Martin, round two. This podcast brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. Sean has multiple pods. Last time we covered his background. We talked about cybersecurity briefly, and today I want to get in the depth of his business. He's co-founder at ITSP Magazine podcast now, because it was magazine maybe and became a pod. He has various different pods that caught my attention. Where to start? So there's the ITSP Magazine podcast, there's the Redefining Cybersecurity pod, Stories from Space pod, Two Cyber Chicks pod, and there's a bunch of others. So we're going to talk about these. We're going to talk about Sean's goals this year and his day-to-day. So Sean, say a little hello again and reintroduce yourself briefly.
Absolutely, Charles. Thanks for having me, and thanks to your audience for tuning in and catching more of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm a cybersecurity guy at heart. I build products. I think we touched on this last time. 13 years at Symantec building products, a few startups building products. I did my own Groupon product at one point, and realized that storytelling is a common theme through all of those. And along my journey, I met my co-founder Marco Ciappelli, and he and I started telling stories for marketing purposes for security vendors. We then started a magazine, ITSP Magazine, which you noted. It was originally a digitally written magazine where we were more journalistic in nature, and after a couple of years we noticed the podcast wave taking off, and so I think we're kind of at the front end of that, and switched the platform to be a podcast platform. And so we've kind of, I don't know, tossed a lot of stuff, I'd say, against the wall to see what sticks. We've tried a bunch of different channels, a lot of them rooted in cybersecurity, of course. Co-hosted by Marco and I. We've had other hosts come and join and leave, and over time we built out a podcast platform, I would say. So a network of shows, which you've highlighted a couple of them there, and I think we've landed in a pretty good spot now. We've worked out a lot of kinks. Technology has grown, so we can leverage technology a bit more. And I think the other big change over the last number of years was the extension beyond. We started off cybersecurity and tech and society, so the human impact in both directions of technology and or in cybersecurity, and then we extended that to include technology, because we realized that tech is at the core of everything that we're talking about these days. So in a nutshell, that's it. Hopefully I made some sense there.
What do you see in podcasting the next couple of years? Because a lot of people are like, yeah, podcasting did its time. I see it lots in podcasting. I think it's one of the best growth method out there to meet new people, strangers, and become friends with them, grow your network, use their network to grow yours, and vice versa. So seems like a top strategy. Me, it's just the scale of it, which is why I'm seeking to create a Charles avatar to interview more people, because I can't interview more than 100 per week. Now, do you think it's quote unquote saturated? Do you think it's hard to make great content? And is there still magic to the science of interviewing someone live?
A lot in there. So I think, no question. I mean, we continue to invest in podcasts and the network and this whole medium. We started audio only, and some of our hosts wanted to do video for various reasons. So we decided to do video as well. So I think there's an audience for that. Some like to watch, some like to listen, some like both. We've also extended to the written. Some people like to read as well. And we're actually taking some of the written stuff that we're doing. We're actually writing again, funny enough. and turning those into podcasts. So we're all in on the audio with the extended video option. And I think that for me, it's a great way to tell a story, regardless of if it's audio to written or written to audio. For me, it's a great way to tell a story through conversations with people that yeah, you might not have and be able to share at a conference or in some meeting room somewhere. And so for me, and my co-founder's from Italy, and I'm often in Europe as well. I'm based in the US, but for us, being international was also a big thing. Especially when we're talking about security, and privacy even more so, there are differences in ethics and regulations and laws around the world that change how technology progresses and how it's used and how people perceive it being used correctly or not. And all those different perspectives to me do what we drive at the core of everything, which is to get people to think, right? Because we're all making decisions every day at home, at work, in our relationships with how we use technology. And if we understand it better, hopefully we can make better decisions to make a better future for ourselves. So I'm all in on the storytelling. I'm all in on podcasts. And yeah, we're continuing to build out the network to bring different types of stories to bear as well.
I want to deviate quickly from the business aspect of things and the podcasting aspect of things. Talk about cybersecurity here with the recent events of Hamas and Israel. How do you think this is gonna play out with them? Like, first, why didn't Israel have the data, the intelligence that Hamas would do that? Like, it seems pretty obvious that they should, at this point. They should tap into phones and just know everything that's going to happen from their opponents. That seems quite easy this day and age. And second, how is this? I don't think it's going to turn to a cyber war because it's really much physical, because they're so like close to one another. But what role is cyber hacks and cyber espionage going to play into the next course of this war, quote unquote?
Well, I can't comment because I don't know on a lot of the stuff you're asking. I can hypothesize on some of the things. Yeah, I don't know exactly why certain intelligence was missed or not acted upon, even if they saw it. Can ask the same question for why certain things happen in the Russian-Ukraine war as well. We just recorded an episode on this topic with somebody looking at critical infrastructure and cyber attacks in that realm, and specifically looking at the two wars we just talked about. And she's presenting at Sector in Canada at a conference in a couple of weeks. So we got some insight to there, and the connection between cyber war and kinetic war is continuing to blur. The lines are blurring. The integration is there, one triggering the other, and vice versa. I think one point I'll make is that just as we use technology to enable good things, bad actors use it to enable themselves to do bad things. And just for one example, why intelligence might not be visible is technologies have the ability to encrypt communications, and people can set up private networks to transfer that information across encrypted lines that might not be visible, and even if they were, couldn't be read. So we see that in technologies like WhatsApp and Signal for our own consumer and commercial communications with our friends. But bad actors use that same technology to protect themselves from being identified and recognized and blocked. So it's an interesting dance, and I think the more we rely on technology, the more susceptible we are to bad things happening. But then, as we often talk about on a number of our shows, the more we embrace technology in a smart way, the better we can prepare ourselves to be more resilient in times like this too.
Now back to podcast and media business types of questions. You have lots of hosts. How do you recruit them, and what's the dealio between you and them in terms of splitting the income?
Yeah, so we primarily, I'll say source, but we most of our hosts are through connections. They're all word of mouth. People appreciate what we do, what we're trying to accomplish with the stories, and they all have their own perspective on things and their own experiences and their own connections, and therefore their own stories that they want to share or bring out to an audience. And so we basically have a network of shows that if somebody wants to come with a regular series of conversations, multiple seasons, we typically look at it as if you can deliver something twice a month on a regular cadence, then we can bring you on as a formal show as part of our network, something that's consistent and regular. And with that, you get your dedicated show on Spotify, Apple, all that stuff, and we reshare the episodes across our primary channel, ITSP Magazine. I forget who it was. Somebody related us to the NPR podcast, where we bring a lot of thought-provoking conversations across a number of different topics. So it was an honor to hear that. I won't get into specifics of revenue share, but if a show is sponsored, we do share in the revenue for that. So we basically host, produce, they record, we host and produce and promote the shows, and when there's income, we then split the revenue.
Okay, and I'm on your website here. I see the sponsor deals start at $600, audio recording, 2.5 for video and audio, and it's a bit longer. It's 35 minutes in that case. So if there is some revenue, the host will make money on their end. If not, they don't make revenues. That how it works.
Yeah, because as you know, it takes time to build an audience and builds credibility and get people interested in the conversations. So we give hosts a head start on that, and we continue to build it out. And when we reach critical mass, then the sponsors come. And what you're highlighting there is, I believe, what we call a brand story, where if a company has a story to share that's promotional in nature, then they can bring Marco or I or one of the other hosts on as a podcast moderator to help them tell that story. And so all outside of that, all of our other conversations are non-promotional. So nobody, if you're not paying to be on, then you're not paying to be on, and the conversation is not about your product or your company, right? It's about some topic that's meaningful, thought-provoking, getting people to think. But if you want to connect it to a brand or some promotion, then we make that very clear, and you have to pay for that.
So it's an episode. Let's say that I'd be like I don't know, Charles Security Inc. And it would be an episode only talking about me and my company and what we do, right? And with an interviewer / a host.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
and how do you make sure to not make it boring and pitchy? And because I thought of offering that on my end, but it was like, what if I get this really crappy company? Wouldn't it ruin my brand? if they pay and they're like, yeah, just I want to pitch myself and so forth. So how do you go with that?
Well, that's the secret sauce, my friend, is having the ability to find a story and bring it out in an interesting way. So Marco and I have uh, I don't know, I'll say a keen ability to kind of find analogies, and we often look back in history for examples of how we encountered different things in time and how we work through those challenges, and so we get people to relate back to things that they may have read about or heard about, and connect it to the current world we live in. We also like to look at um, how the future might unfold, which kind of sets a different stage as well. And so, yeah, so I think you're spot on, right? If somebody it's not a 30-minute infomercial, it's still a thought-provoking, interesting conversation that gets you to wonder, well, how does this relate to what I'm doing, either in business or at home with my family? And yeah, so making that connection, that personal connection, which is all storytelling. So that's what we do 99% of the time for non-promotion, and we just translate that same idea to the promotional stories.
And the pods, you've started it a couple years ago. How has it grown since then? And have you checked the boxes you set for yourself?
Yeah, so tremendous growth. I'm trying to remember. It's well over 1,600 episodes published at this point. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of downloads or plays. But I think that there's so much going on. You know this very well yourself. It's not just recording and pumping out a podcast. People have to find you. People want to know a little bit about it first, right? You need the infrastructure to, and especially as we add more shows, you need infrastructure to collect the episodes and the information required to produce them and then and publish them. And of course, to reach people, you need to promote them. So all the systems required to push it out on social media, and knowing how to mention people and companies, and when it's appropriate to do one or the other or both. So all of that, I would say, I don't know what the right percentage is. It could be 50-50, managing the backend infrastructure versus managing the actual pods themselves. And of course, the hosts have their own responsibilities for sourcing guests and having good conversations and doing the recordings in high quality that come out nicely when we produce and publish them. So there's a lot to work on there too. So yeah, if it was one show, it'd be a very different story. But because we have, I don't know, 20 plus shows now, there's a lot to work out, a lot to keep our team organized and in sync with what shows coming out on what day. Does it tick all the boxes in terms of quality and everything else that we require to continue pushing them out? So yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I'm a builder and a program manager at heart. I think we talked about that in the last pod. So for me, a lot of the operational stuff is kind of like geeking out, and it's like eating dessert every day. So when I get to play in the back end and make sure everything's flowing well for ourselves and our host, and ultimately our audience.
But it's not always that way with hosts. How do you select them? How do you make sure that they keep on doing a good job and that there's not decline in what they do, that they don't get bored and start not seeing results and quit like a bunch of hosts did?
Yeah, we we view this as a relationship, right? And while we do have a memorandum of understanding, there's no binding anything other than when we succeed, we all succeed. And therefore, it's in everybody's best interest to, if they're going to commit, they commit. And if they deliver, they can deliver consistently. And if they want to continue delivering consistently to generate revenue, then that's the path. If any of those things fall down, it becomes very clear. And we've had people leave. We still love them, of course. Podcasting isn't for everybody, right? You have to have a passion, you have to have the time, you have to know a little bit about the tech to record and edit, and that takes time, and revenue, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't come immediately, right? Just because you launch a podcast doesn't mean you're going to get sponsors right away. It takes time to build that. So people come and go. Marco and I I don't know how many shows we've started and killed. We had a whole series called The Other Society with entire business built around it. That a beautiful idea, great start from an execution perspective. That was just too hard to keep going with everything else that we have going. So that's just the reality of podcasting. It's a lot of work, and not everybody's up to it on a consistent level. And we're happy to give somebody a shot, as long as they say they want to commit. And if they can show they can initially, then we give them a show formally. And if they can't, then the show goes away. Simple as that.
And I'm seeing that you're keeping your investment lean into podcasting. You're not paying the host like 50K a year. You're just like providing them a platform, and then if you get paid, we all get paid. So I like that model. There's still investments in starting a pod, but I guess you got that somewhat narrowed down. Why a podcast network? I've seen is it Pat O'Shaughnessy that's starting Mighty Podcast, or I forgot what it was, but there's a bunch of other companies that are mediatizing themselves and starting a bunch of other podcasts. What is the why behind that? Why would you want to become a large podcast network and eventually an iHeartRadio?
Well, the core of that answer lies in the fact that Marco and I can't have every conversation that we want to have. And just especially when we expanded to technology touches everything, right? We have a host coming on talking about, she's going to be talking about technology and personal healthcare. Something Marco and I both appreciate, but we just can't add that show ourselves, right? We can't. It's not one we can do regularly, consistently, with a lot of knowledge. We have one around space exploration, and we have another one with hosting stuff on space itself, a spacecraft, an astronaut hosting that show. I'm not an astronaut. I'm not able, and I don't know the people that Charles is having on his show, Charles Camarada. And so I think there are so many topics connected to technology that impact how we live and how we work on a daily basis, that we wanted to give a space for people who are passionate about those different topics to have these conversations and to share their knowledge and their connections knowledge with an audience. So that's the answer for that. And I think from a business perspective, the more stories from different places, the more people you connect to. But a lot of people in cybersecurity love space. So chances of them listening to my Redefining Security podcast and also being interested in Charles Camarada's Leading Edge Discovery podcast, very likely, right? And so they can more easily, we hope, find his show after listening to mine, and vice versa. And of course, the larger audience, all together, the rising tide lifts all boats, right?
How do you know how to kill an experiment? You had the podcast been running for a while and it's just not gathering any traction. No one wants to sponsor it. But the host is still there and growing very slowly, showing hints every now and then. How do you know when to cut it off, or if it is to be cut it off?
Yeah, we've that conversation happens. It's a conversation. I'll start with that. And then it happens in both directions, right? So some hosts will be forward with, I'm not able, or it's the other way. We noticed, host, that you may not be able. And so we have a conversation. What do you want to do here? And that conversation produces the end result, whether they step it back up or they need to put it on pause. We've had shows pause, personal reasons, health reasons, work reasons, whatever. A lot of our hosts have they call real jobs, right? And the podcast is something they do as a hobby to connect with the community. Not every host is interested in the revenue. Some of the hosts just want to do it for the sake of sharing and to have that connection and have that persona be visible. So the money is not there as an incentive. And we're happy to continue to provide the platform for that. So if they're consistent in delivering, even if there is no sponsor, if the sponsor is not an important thing to them, it's not an important thing to us. It's more important to have the story out there.
Well, Sean, thank you for the wisdom you've shared today. Where can people find out more about you?
So ITSPmagazine.com is where all of our shows are, and you can look up all our hosts and learn more about them as well. Sean Martin, that's SeanMartin.com is where you can learn more about me and some of my experience in building security products and other stuff that I've done. And so those are the two main places. And on LinkedIn, Twitter, you name it, I'm there. Happy to connect and chat with folks. And Charles, it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed these conversations and hope to have more with you.